attraction, the law of abundance, the law of equivalent exchange. Study your laws, the laws of cause and effect, the karmic cycle. Study your laws. Dwell into your mind, meditate. Understand that you can alter your realms by your train of thought. The minute you slow down your thought, you're able to leave your body through astral projection. You're only enslaved if you can't control your mind. So while you can and while you don't have the whole world against you, or you don't have a lot of worries, worry on freeing your mind from this realm. When you can free your mind from this realm, everything is but a thought. And if you can't free your mind, then you're a slave to this realm.
American gangsta, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangsta, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangsta, Chi-Town bred, cause I gotta rep the city to the death. Annihilate them till I don't see nothing left. They love it when I spit it for the bitches, now I spit it for the thugs. Hat cock to the right, hat cock to the left. Whether it's a four or it's a focus on your chest. I spit it for the lords and the folks for the prince for the blood. I'm at the American dream, I roll to the green with the souls and the breeds and the cobras, the kings and the 216mm bullets for the niggas that are trying to do the opposite. They don't really wanna see how psycho I can get. I don't really see a motherfucker stopping this. Try to come in at you facing the apocalypse. 40 cal I have a screaming, I don't wanna die. I ain't becoming nauseous with the fake thugs, so it's love to the real chiefs and underbosses. To the niggas that I call the case, I gotta do it big to get what nobody gave us. We was born into the system, so don't be mad at what you made us. Pull a pistol while I cock it and I'm busting in the sky. One time for the US, for turning my niggas to gangsters, cause getting money is what they do best. Product of the environment, element of Capone. Gangsters is bosses. K-Town is the motherfucker hood. The block is the company, come and step into my office. I'm a American gangster, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangster, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangster, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangster, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangster. Forever see me in a lack, got work, but you never see me with a pack. A motherfucker say he never see me with a strap, and I heard a motherfucker say he don't see me up in the hood. Little nigga, I don't see you, cause homie, my hood is worldwide, and getting money is what we do. Making these joints lock when I freak you. Hit a 3-point shot like he do. Talk a little rookie, you killing the gang like Pop, nigga, we point Glocks like he do. See you, don't wanna recognize that I'm the mayor of the Midwest. I'm like for real, controversy in the middle. I guess I'm like Shaquille. You can gon' feel like you feel, even though the haters I would like to kill. But if you can hit me with the things a little cheaper, shit, let's strike the deal. Got the cycles in the city rolling with me, ever ready to bust a shot that they didn't like do. I feel better your body's like an animal because I'm a cannibal. I eat a nigga like food, ripping through your flesh so I can devour your heart. Music is my playground, but if the rapping don't get you, I hit his head with the back of the pistol until the bitch nigga lay down. Ain't no competition, I had to be fucking with the twin. Whoever coming for me just died. I'ma get it every time I wanna get it, and I live in proof. It's a category F5. American gangster, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangster, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangster, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangster, U.S. hustler, home of the brave, and in God we trust. I'm just an American gangster.
To your eyes, which goes to your pineal, and the photons that come on those angles of light carry messages, and it happens when you close your eyes. Your pineal is stimulated when you close your eyes. Now the powers that be don't want you to use it, and thus we've all heard of calcification. You can decalcify your pineal gland. So the Vatican know of this knowledge. They truly know of it. They cannot not know of it. And the pine cone sits on the staff of the Pope also. I've mentioned this before. What is this pineal gland that everyone's talking about, and what happens when you trigger it or activate it in meditation, as people always ask? Well, the pineal gland is a very interesting organ in your body, or gland as it is, and it's actually filled with fluid, and surrounded around there are very similar structures to that of the retina of the eye. Now, something which is very, very interesting about the pineal is that it's connected to the same sensory visual part of your brain as what your two eyes are. Now, inside this fluid, they say there are small crystals. And of course the pineal gland is light reactive, but it is stimulated by darkness. Science has shown us that in darkness the pineal is stimulated. This is why we dream at night time when the eyes are closed. Your pineal is the thing that conjures these dreams into you, or brings you into the dream reality, as it were. Now, with this little gland in your head, and it is, as I say, filled with fluid which has small tiny crystals within it, it is ultimately your connection to higher dimensions of reality. It is your connection to the spiritual plane. It is, as it was said, the seat of your soul. Now, the pineal gland, being that connection, is something that should be nurtured and looked after. And as I say, every religion, every scripture, every messiah, every spiritual teacher pretty much has leaned towards this, if not directly, then in a mystic sense. We can look to the ancient Middle Eastern religions, such as things within Egypt and the symbology of Samaria, and you see several constant references to the pine cone. The largest statue of a pine cone on planet Earth at present is situated in Vatican City. So the Vatican know of this knowledge. They truly know of it. They cannot not know of it. And the pine cone sits on the staff of the Pope also. I've mentioned this before. So what exactly is this pineal of yours? As I say, it's a connection to the higher dimensions, and it should be nurtured, cared for, and looked after. Now, I say inside there is fluid and there are crystals. Now, melatonin is created within the pineal, and they say DMT is a precursor from this. Just as with Moses had to reach the land, the promised land flowing with milk and honey, milk serotonin, honey DMT, and amber substance serotonin and milky white substance. Thus in meditation you reach the same promised land, the land flowing from your pituitary and pineal of milk and honey. Now DMT, the problem you have is we can't actually autopsy a human being fast enough because of DMT's chemical state to prove that DMT is being created within there. But we know melatonin is, and they are nearly 100% confident in many science fields that DMT is produced in there. For all you can't provide physical evidence because you can't physically autopsy someone fast enough to prove it. But they say small amounts of DMT secreted whilst using certain substances such as ayahuasca, which is where you get this God experience that shamans embark those following them and themselves upon to hear answers from that other dimension, from the spiritual plane, from your connection to the intuitive psychic self, the part of you, the intelligent part of you that allows your hair to grow, your heart to beat. The pineal and DMT is a very interesting substance because it is recorded that when DMT crystallizes, if you try to break it with something, you get a flash of a singular color. Very, very interesting chemical and very, very interesting material. So imagine you've got a tray with dried DMT and you hit it with a hammer or something, a rock or something like this, and you get, because of the crystals smashing, you get a flash of a singular light. If you just equate that the fact around the pineal gland you have this material that is said to be nearly identical to the retina of the human eye, it's connected to the visual cortex of the human brain. And when you strike DMT, which is very close to melatonin and we presume comes from the pineal because it's very clear when people have these experiences what is happening, that pineal filled with little crystals and fluid within it, which stimulates itself in darkness when you close your eyes. And those who sat in the dark saw a great light, as it is written in Christianity. That this, on a quantum level, on a nano-quantum level, biological level, is a projector, if you want to look at it that way. It's a spiritual projector that has the ability to conjure all colours. We see this from the fact that crystallized DMT, when struck, sparks into a single colour. So inside your pineal, you have the ability to have projections of full colours that connect to the visual part of your brain. And this is where your dreaming states are coming from. People say, what happens when you activate the pineal? Well, ask yourself. Every night you dream, you'll use your pineal. It's part of your anatomy. It's not something to be feared, as is commonly touted within many different faiths on the planet. Well, not many, predominantly in the West, via persons following Islam and Christianity, they fear it. They've been taught to fear it because it's where they self-empower. God is not so ridiculous and not so childish as to put a portal to a demonic world inside of you. And if he were, then he's not a very nice God, is he? Of course that's not what it is, but you believing it is, because the Vatican don't want you to know, for all they have a massive statue of a pine cone, so it's very important to them, is important to them because then you still require them for your salvation, and you cannot become fully empowered. Face it, the largest religions on the planet are now corporate. They are corporations driven by money, wealth, power, and the material wealth. I'm not saying all persons who follow it are like that, but we have to admit that's how it is. Otherwise, the Vatican would end world hunger instead of sitting on dormant, stagnant wealth. This is not as Jesus Christ would have wanted. So this gland is of massive importance to you and to I and to everybody, because it allows you to connect to spirit. And the powers that be, they want to suppress it. Now everyone's heard of calcifying your pineal gland. And when you activate your pineal, it's not some big wondrous thing, I became superhuman. This is nonsense. People touting that, just switch off from them. What you need to do is realize that basically you'll subtly begin to tune into yourself as a more intuitive and psychic being, and you'll also connect to the higher dimensions where light beings can dwell that are not as dense as the physical beings we are, and can pass the correct information to you. If you don't want to see them as beings of consciousness, just see it as a new field of information. The same field of information that makes your hair grow and your heart beat. Now, we are consciousness. We are in the ever-present field of self. We reach up to self in meditation, and we feel that self that fills all life. Consciousness is ultimately light. And as we see things like the sun changing and governing everything that's going on around us, of course it has an influence on yourself, on the light, on the consciousness. And this is why we're starting to see a shift in people waking up and looking for knowledge. Because as again it is written in Christianity, when will you know Christ has come? Look for the man with the pitcher of water. And when you do go into your house and go into the upper room, men didn't carry pitchers of water back then, but Aquarius does. And this is the age of Aquarius. It's a time of change for all consciousness because it's a time of change for light. You can see it in the behavior of the sun, even with physical science. And that light comes to your eyes, which goes to your pineal. And the photons that come on those angles of light carry messages. Just as angels were messengers of light, photons travel on an angle of light to get to you. They go into your pineal, you can hear what you're supposed to do. My message was go to Tanzania. 4 years later, we have 600 children liberated, most of which liberated from child labour. 30 children living here with special needs who were struggling desperately outside. Animal rescue shelter, centre for street involved children. Countless people helped with medical care thanks to you guys who shared. All because I stimulated my pineal in meditation, I cleaned my body, I made it alkaline, I cleansed it, and I listened to that higher realm of information, which is where God dwells, and he asked me to come here via my pineal, and a synchronicity created whilst I was indulging in the reality that your pineal allows you to when you connect to the seat of your soul. To hear God must have an antenna via your pineal to this higher realm, this different light. And it happens when you close your eyes. Your pineal is stimulated when you close your eyes. This is where meditation comes in. Now, the powers that be don't want you to use it, and thus we've all heard of calcification. You can decalcify your pineal gland. It's been calcified predominantly by fluoride. Fluoride added to your water supposedly just to stop us getting cavities. It's strange how it calcifies the most important possible gland for us to have any form of spirituality, and here we are at a time where many people think they're just bags of skin without any spirit, soul or connection to a higher being, because their pineal is calcified and they can't feel it. It's atrophied by that which has been put into our water and poisoned through processed foods, processed waters using fluoride, and also the media which we take in, such as television, which ultimately shuts it down all it wants to, because you surrender to a false light instead of to the natural light, which is where the photons can come to you. If you stay at a false light all the time, you're not going to get those photons. The pineal gland is a very important thing. Christianity spoke about it, Hindu faith speaks about it, Buddhism speaks about it, all faiths across the planet spoke about it, all ancient religions have the pinecone symbology. You must eat right, you must go into the dark to see the great light, and you must understand that this tool in the center of your brain is where you will find out how you can live your highest good. Do as was told by great teachers such as Jesus Christ, and let thy eye be single, so your whole body will fill with light. And then you will meet God face to face as Jacob did in the place they call Peniel. And once you're face to face, you can directly ask, where am I supposed to go? How do I help to lift this up out of the darkness that the planet is currently seemingly in? And God can respond to you because you're on the right frequency and you're connecting to your spiritual self.
The beginning of the study of magnetism can be traced back to Egypt. Also, we find the Greeks used it, and among the Greeks and early Egyptians, we have the first understanding of the nature of magnetism. It was used principally in healing. It was well known to Pythagoras, who gave us considerable information on the subject, which was promptly forgotten by everybody else. Then we have little knowledge of it, except through the Arabs. The Chinese were aware of it because of the discovery of the mariner's compass. But for the most part, it was neglected until the 17th century, when it became involved in the story of Rosicrucianism. The alchemists, the Rosicrucians, and the Hermetists all were unfolding phases of magnetic theory. Then we come down a little later and we come upon a curious instrument, Mesmer's magnetic tub. This was a kind of tank in which many people put their feet at the same time and held hands and created a battery out of the water in the tank. Incidentally, the magnetic theory is based upon a very simple fact, namely that what we call empty air is not empty at all. It is the most profoundly used all the elements that we know anything about. We all live within air and have our being, and we know that if air fails, we die. But what we do not realize is that air is not just some oxygen or helium or something of this nature. Air is something in itself. It is a substance of itself. It is a substance so real and so important that it's almost impossible to estimate it. It is a tremendous field of magnetic energy. The atmosphere carries the magnetism of the sun. The study of the magnetic powers of the sun will be more or less clearly understood by the study of the seasons. Winter, summer, spring, and these things have all to do with a magnetic factor in the air. And we think of it only as in trying to explain it as a physical astronomical phenomena, since there's the rotation and revolutions of the sun and planets. But each of these planets is a field of magnetic energy. And this energy comes to us through what we call air. One thing we have learned from television is that air transmits. We know, for instance, that we can have all kinds of programs on the air at the same time. And they can come from all directions. And they can overlap and interlap. But each one will remain separately identified as though it was moving in a channel or circuit of its own. Something went through was vibration. And this vibration in the magnetic field can be divided into an infinite complexity of separate emanations. In other words, if we had 1,000 different channels, they could be differentiated in the magnetic field so that each one would be broadcast correctly and properly for whatever it is. Thus we realize there's something out there besides air, something besides helium and oxygen, something besides the ordinary factors we take into consideration scientifically. We are in the presence of a mysterious agent, an agent that is part of everything that we are. Now, studying magnetism as it comes into the human body, we've discovered along with Kilda that each human body is surrounded by an etheric or energy field. This energy field is sometimes referred to as an aura, but it is not the true aura that we think of in metaphysics. This magnetic field is an area of energy. This area of energy forms an egg-like atmospheric sheath around the physical body, usually extending 3 to 5 feet from it in each direction. This energy field is the basis of virtue, because this energy field depends for its reality, its serviceability, and its protecting power to move emotion, thought, and the attitudes of the person around which this magnetic field is gathered. In other words, the individual, if they are normal, if mentally, emotionally, and physically, they are keeping the rules, this magnetic field forms a tremendous protection. It is normal, it is healthy, it is constantly able to handle infections and all kinds of difficulties. It will help to heal wounds, it will help to recover the use of functions and organs, and if we are deprived of some part of the body, it will try to compensate for it. As long as the individual takes proper care of his magnetic field, it will serve him. Now, this is a phase of morality that is generally overlooked. It is assumed that these magnetic fields are something you don't pay much attention to. They're there, maybe they'll help a little. But the truth of the matter is that practically the whole survival of the individual depends upon maintaining the integrity of this flow of energy into the magnetic field. This energy comes from the sun. It comes through a mysterious energy tube in the magnetic field. It enters the individual through the crown of the head. It disseminates through the entire body, and it's excreted back again through the lower centers of the body and is re-cleansed by the solar energy. This is a kind of a little private tank or capsule of life that we are all carrying about with us all the time. Now, the problem of morality in this is very definite. The moment we break rules, we damage that magnetic flow. We have got to keep the laws of nature, and these in turn are the laws of God, or the magnetic field fails. It can fail because of physical intemperances, which reduce its integrity and reduce its power. It can be wasted in riotous living, which is a common cause these days. It can be variously destroyed by moods, by attitudes, by fears, by complexes. It can be destroyed or damaged by alcohol, drugs, narcotics, all kinds of things. But if this field is damaged, it immediately reacts into health. It damages the individual's vitality. It makes him more easily subject to contagions and infections, and it definitely shortens the life expectancy. Now, we think of the magnetic field as surrounding the entire structure of the body, as Kilner shows in his work on the human atmosphere, and Babbitt also in his study of the atom. This, however, is only a phase of it. Each part of the body has a magnetic field. Each unit within the individual has its survival in a unit of energy. And this unit of energy is present in the smallest subdivision of imaginable space. It is in the tiniest atom. There is no such a thing as a dead particle in the universe. Even if it is killed by something, the very disintegrating process is a symbol of life energy. Therefore, we are confronted with the natural problem of realizing that virtue is to keep the law of the energy field. Now, the law of the energy field, just by coincidence, is also the law of integrity. The energy field is what establishes right and wrong. The energy field tells us that to lose our disposition and temper fit is wrong. To use various negative, destructive attitudes is wrong. To compromise the principles of right living is wrong. To think badly, to feel unpleasantly. To be engaged in any action or concept which is contrary to the common good damages the magnetic field and therefore is wrong. Selfishness injures that field. Every vice we know, the breaking of any of the 10 Commandments and a number of other rules result in damage to that field. It has nothing to do with nation, it has nothing to do with the ordinary concepts of codes, because the final code itself is based upon the life principle in each part of the human constitution. So we have each little cell has its own moral responsibilities. The stomach has its own magnetic field. The stomach is not simply an organ, it is an organism. It is a living thing within the human body. The same is true of the heart, the brain, the glandular structure, all the organs, the intestines, all the motor system, the nervous system, the endocrine system. These are all entities. They are entities of magnetic unities. They are part of living organisms which are cooperating together for the common good. To abuse one is to damage all. To neglect one is to neglect all. Each of these organs has its own field in the body, and all these fields together constitute the grand magnetic field that surrounds the complete person. Now we go inside of this for a moment to see what we're dealing with. So we go back to Pythagoras, who was very timely in that. He tells us that in Egypt there was a temple in which therapy was the result of this contemplation of symmetrical geometric solids. In other words, the images of therapy were mathematical cubes, octagons, and various forms, dodecahedrons, each one placed upon a kind of altar or pedestal for the contemplation of the sufferer. All were symmetric geometric solids, perfect and complete in structure. To look upon them was therapeutic, because to look upon them accepted their energy as a reality in our lives. Now these stone solids apparently were not alive. They only gave the impression of value, but actually they were alive. Every form in nature, natural or artificial, has a magnetic field. From the tiniest atom to the greatest galaxy, the magnetic fields are present, and the rules of each of them must be obeyed. Now, if an individual looking at a geometric solid sees in it a perfect proportion, this realization enters into the subconscious life of the person. The imagery of that solid is sent into the consciousness in the form of a benevolent magnetic center. It means that the individual is seeing a harmony, is seeing something in perfect order and perfect correctness. And in visualizing, wherever we see perfection, it improves ourselves. Wherever we accept discord as inevitable, it injures ourselves. Everywhere looking around us in nature, we see that all natural things are benevolent. It is only when these are abused, mostly by humanity, that these benevolences are lost. So we find that we live in a universe in which everything is in harmony if we are. Now we can say, of course, that somebody else might be out of harmony, and this could injure us. Actually, it's not quite true. The magnetic field which protects us against any negative magnetic field that does not arise within ourselves. We are not contaminated by other people, unless by our very conscious weakness, or our intellectual weakness, or our emotional weakness, we surrender our integrity to the attitudes of other people. If we commit misdemeanors of one kind or another, we are responsible by the effect of these mistakes on our own magnetic field. Now the magnetic field not only covers this type of thing, but it covers elimination, the intestinal walls. All of this type of thing is damaged, as we know, by hysteria, by various moods. The individual becomes ill because of a bad disposition. Now we consider this to be just symbol of something that happens that way, but it is not. The individual is sickened by dispositional fault, is sickened because he has damaged the magnetic field of some essential part of his own nature. If he has damaged the magnetic field of his digestive system, he will have dyspepsia. And if the dyspepsia lasts long enough and the magnetic field is thickened long enough, then long enduring chronic ailments can set in. No individual actually is infected entirely from himself, but never completely without himself. All of these unities of fact must be in harmony. Now in the Rosicrucian philosophy, we had alchemy, the transmutation of various phases of life. Alchemy was a transformation and a transmutation of energies. And these energies are essentially the same ones that we have in magnetism. We therefore have a constant realization that everything we do and everything that we see and have has values of its own. Now let us pick up a pebble from the beach, and we suddenly realize that we're in the presence of a little stone. Today there is quite an interest in little stones, all kinds of stones. We are interested in the crystals that form in rocks and all these types of things. But crystals are formed by magnetism. They are formed by a rate of vibration peculiar to a certain element. And that particular rate of vibration can evolve through the mineral, plant, vegetable, and animal. It is always present. There is a magnetic core on each kingdom, and each kingdom unfolds within this magnetic field. And within each of the composite fields, individual members of the fields with various degrees of growth are variously individually conditioned. Everywhere, this process of keeping faith with integrity becomes the natural secret of security, survival, and world peace. Now, we can say that it would be very unlikely that we'll say a potato could have a magnetic field of its own, but it does. In fact, every cell within the potato has a magnetic field of its own. Therefore, we come into the problem of nutrition. And nutrition is very largely the study of the magnetic fields of various food products. It also tells us what happens when these food products are adulterated or are variously misused or poisonous elements are introduced into them. All this is part of a mystery that is solved in magnetism. We pass laws against these misuses, but we fail to realize that it is not just the physical factor that we have to work with. The physical factor is only a fragment of it. The main problem is to realize that behind all of these problems, whether of government or of religion or of philosophy, all these things are in trouble because of lack of integrity. And integrity is simply keeping the laws and rules of energy fields. Each field has its own integrities. All integrities in all fields are compatible. All lack of integrities, all departures from integrity in any or all fields are in conflict constantly. The only way the individual can escape conflict is by never abusing the energy factors of his own life. He must never abuse his body, his emotions, or his mind. He must never permit himself to develop attitudes that are incompatible with the integrities which nature has bestowed. The magnetic fields are absolutely honest. There is no possible way of making them dishonest. The only thing we can do with them is to destroy or limit the manifestation of their integrity. If we break the rule, we lose the benefit of that particular energy. When we lose that benefit, we then say that evil has come to us. But it is not an evil thing that has come to us. It is the failure of a good thing to be developed and purified and intensified. The magnetic fields are also in a state of constant evolution. They're in evolution in the life of the person. The individual may be born on a certain level of magnetic integrity. If he becomes a better person, he strengthens these values in himself, because actually it is all a matter of gradually strengthening the perfection of an energy resource. Now, no one is going to perfect it in one life or 100 lives maybe, but it's going to grow. And the more integrity grows, the more rapidly the individual becomes harmoniously adjusted to the principle of life to which he belongs. In our world at the present time, we are in a sad state in which practically everyone has broken every conceivable rule. We are living day by day, trying to live off the profits from our own mistakes. And this is not really profitable. We are not realizing that this has nothing to do primarily with the theology. This has nothing to do with laws of government. This has nothing to do actually with our legal codes. It has to do with the relationship of energy to its proper ends and purposes. We know what it's supposed to be, we know what it's supposed to do, and we know that it isn't accomplishing that. Everything that has an existence has a magnetic field. It may have one that is not even visible. And the whole of our atmosphere, the whole of the world in which we live, is one mass of magnetic interplays. But as long as these are kept honest, they are all compatible. And a universe in which there was no dishonesty would be free from every infirmity.
Every 29 and a half days, when the moon is in the sign of the zodiac that the sun was in at the birth of the native, there is a seed, a psychophysical germ, born in the or out of the solar plexus, also known as the manger. And this seed is taken up by the nerves or branches of the pneumogastric nerve and becomes the fruit of the tree of life, or the tree of good and evil. Everything that we think of as religious today under the Vaticanized Roman Empire is a subversion of the truth, not the truth. So it's all trapped in the words. You have to understand the etymology of these words, what they mean. So, Christos in Greek is oil, sacred oil. These adepts knew that the secretion, gray matter, the gray creative, which issues or secretes from the cerebrum, was the source and cause of the physical expression called man. And they knew that the river of Jordan was symbolized in the spinal cord, and that the Dead Sea was used to symbolize the sacred plexus at the base of the spinal column, where the Jordan spinal cord ends, typifying the entrance of Jordan into the Dead Sea. The thick, oily, and salty substance composed the sacral plexus, the quadra equina, which means the horse's tail in Latin. What very few people know is that the Bible itself, the bibliography, is two things. It's a genealogy, a family lineage. So-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so, and so on. But the book itself and all the characters in it actually refer to the temple of God, which is the human body itself. I know people find this hard to believe, but there are all these clues. Like, for example, the mountain known as Golgotha in the biblical story. Well, Golgotha literally means the place of the skull. So most people think it's a real mountain sitting somewhere in the Levant, but it was never meant to be a real mountain. That's what Rome did. They rewrote the history. Golgotha is actually your skull, every human being's skull, because that's this place where the crucifixion takes place. It's all inside of us. When the oil or ointment is crucified, crucified means to increase in power 1,000-fold, not to kill. It remains 2 days and a half, the moon's period in the sign of the tomb, cerebellum. On the third day, ascends to the pineal gland that connects to the cerebellum. Connects to the cerebellum with the optic thalamus, the central eye in the throne of God, is the chamber overtopped by hollow or hallowed, caused by the curve of the cerebrum, the most high of the body, which is the temple of the living God, the living, vital substance, which is precipitation of the breath of life, breathed into man, therefore the holy or whole ghost of breath. So what's being explained here, it's a little cryptic, the language, but what's being explained here is the sacred secret or secretion. That's what that word means, secret, secretion, that comes from the pituitary and the pineal gland. That chemistry comes out of the brain, goes down the spinal column all the way to the sex organs in order to make new life. It's charged with electric soul power. But that force also, if not used to make life and not expelled or wasted, it changes its chemistry once it mixes together. That's the chemical wedding that the alchemists talk about. Once that new substance happens, it becomes less dense and it floats back up the spinal column in the cerebral spinal fluid like mercury does in a thermometer. And it rests in the nave, in the gland known as the solar plexus. And it charges itself there based on the way you live. And the way you treat your body, the way you eat and drink and sleep and exercise. And it rests there for 2.5 days. Now that 2.5 days is significant because it's the time each month that the moon is in the sign in which you were born under, your sun sign. So whatever month you're born under, January, February, March, that's the month, that's your sun sign. And the moon goes every 30 days, actually every 28 days, or sometimes 29, just like the female cycle. It goes through each stage in the sky of the sun sign. So every month, every person has 2.5 days where the moon is in their sun sign. And that particular moment, that type of light is a cycle that started at your birth. And your body knows when that is. You might not know, but your subconscious body knows. And it takes an electrical charge from a combination of the sun and the moon's electromagnetic energy and charges this up while it's in your solar plexus. That's why it's called your solar plexus. Ever wonder that? Interesting how every doctor around the world, no matter what culture you come from, points to this weird spot where your rib cage comes together in the center of your body, and they say, oh yeah, that's the solar plexus. But no one ever asks why it's called that. The pineal gland is the pinnacle of the temple, the modus operandi in which the oil of the spinal cord reaches the pineal gland and is described in what follows. There is no name under heaven whereby you may be saved except Jesus Christ did, christened, and then crucified. the correct rendering of the text in Greek. Every 29.5 days, when the moon is in the sign of the zodiac that the sun was in at the birth, the native, there is a seed, a psychophysical germ, born in the or out of the solar plexus, also known as the manger. And this seed is taken up by the nerves or branches of the pneumogastric nerve and becomes the fruit of the tree of life, or the tree of good and evil. Good, if saved and cast upon the waters, circulation to reach the pineal gland, and it's known as evil if eaten or consumed in sexual expression on the physical plane, or by alcoholic drinks or gluttony that causes fermentation or acid and even alcohol in the intestinal tract. Thus, in quotes, no drunkard and inherit the kingdom of heaven, or acids and alcohol cut or chemically split the oil that unites with the mineral salts in the body and thus produces the monthly seed. So that's what he's saying, is that this oil is, it's special because it's electrically charged, and it also is special because it has the ability to make new life, and your body created it. But it's also very, it's fragile based on the way you treat your body. So the idea is to take care of it and to know that it's traveling up and down your spine and transmutate your sex energy accordingly. Now, he's not talking about celibacy. He's talking about knowing the body and using that energy at the right time for the right things. The seed, having the odor of fish, was called Jesus, or iktos, which is Greek for fish, and nun, in Hebrew for of life. I am the bread that came down from heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. The fruit of the tree of life, therefore, is the fish bread, of which thou shalt not eat on the plain or animal, Adam, earth dust of the earth plane. Adam, the word Adam often in Hebrew text means red earth or earth dust. But to him that overcometh will I give to eat the fruit of the tree of life, because he saved it, and it returned to him in the cerebellum, and the home of the spiritual man, the ego. The cerebellum is the heart-shaped, and it is called the heart in Greek. Thus, in quotes, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So, another little thing, another side. The tree of knowledge, or the tree of life, whatever you want to call it, is not a physical place. It's never been a physical place. That was the invention of Rome, to pull people away from the real place of salvation, which is your own body, the human form. And the tree of life is your cerebrospinal. Your brain is the root ball, and all your nerves branch out, going down your body like a tree. You know, we are like a walking inverted tree. That is the original tree. The body organ that men in their ignorance call heart is termed divider or pump in Greek and Hebrew. Our blood divider is not the button that we touch when we think, but it is the upper lobe of the cerebellum that vibrates thought. The lower lobe is the animal, mortal lobe, that governs the animal world. A section of the body below solar plexus, called Lower Egypt, natural body, kingdom of earth, Apollyon, the devil, lived spelled backwards, Satan. Saturn governs the bowels. Okay, I know there's a lot there, but again, you have to know the etymology. The word devil, E-E-V-I-L, is just lived spelled backwards. So that was also a subversion that happened when the clergy knew how to write and nobody else did. They subverted the word lived, reversed it, and made the devil. Now, what they're really talking about was what we all used to know is the animal parts of our body, the part that we abuse or we don't hold sacred, meaning our sex organs. And that's also, I know this is a touchy subject, but that's also why the word Sodom refers to your lower excretory organs. And that's what Sodom and Gomorrah was all about. Even it was never a real place. Sodom and Gomorrah is not a city or a place on earth. It's a place in your bowels of hell, so to speak. Jacob's ladder was not a real event that some man named Jacob witnessed. Jacob's ladder was a story, an allegory that talked about the spine, the ladder that angels went up and down are the 33 vertebrae of the spine. And angels are angles of light. They're also called messengers in Hebrew, the Elohim. But really those messengers, what they really refer to is the newborn child, the innocence of new humanity. The point is that Jacob's ladder it's not a story of a man named Jacob. Just think for a moment on the colossal ignorance of these priests who did not know that Jacob in Hebrew means heel catcher or circle, a ladder that referred to the influence of the signs of the zodiac upon the earth. And as one sign rising every 2 hours forms a circle every 24 hours, the 4 and 20 elders of Revelation, the outer stars and the rising suns, suns, S-U-N, rising suns, and sons, S-O-N-S. Catching on? He asks, to the last sons of the sign ascending. So, okay, he's saying that the word Jacob means heel catcher, and it does in reference to the sky or the zodiac. It's still, see, he's not saying Jacob's ladder, he's saying the name Jacob. So there's two meanings. There is the ladder, which, like I said before, is the human spine, in which the prodigal son of the sacred oil or Christos travels up and down to offer healing and enlightenment to the human form. And then there's also the heel catcher, the name Jacob. And in very ancient zodiacs, you will see a man drawn in the center of them, where his back is arched and his heels circle around and touch the back of his head, create a circle. And that's what the word Jacob means. That's the name. It's the man in the sky, which refers to the zodiac, which is a reflection of the time cycle of the human body. But now we come to the Antichrist. The Council of Nicaea, dominated by Constantine, voted that these symbols of the human body were persons, that Jesus was a certain historical man, a contention utterly and indubitably without foundation in fact, and that all who believed the story would be saved and forgiven here and now. The idea appealed to the Constantine as an easy way out of his troubled mind, and so the scheme of salvation by the actual blood of a real man or God was engrafted in the world. Constantine and his dupes saw that the only way to perpetuate the infamy was to keep the world in ignorance of the operation of the cosmic law. So they changed, quote unquote, times and seasons. So that's what I'm saying. The invention of the Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar, there's other Roman calendars. They slowly changed the beginning of the year. They slowly changed some of the names of the months. They slowly changed the amount of days in a month. That's why we have leap years now. Again, it's trapped in the words. If you look at the words, the etymology, for example, the word March is not the third month of the year because the spring equinox happens March 20th every year. And March in Latin literally means primo. Primo means first. So March is telling you it's the first month of the year. And you can go all the way around the year and go down to, well, look at December. Most people think December is the last month of the year, the 12th month. But in Latin, the word dece or deca, December, deca, means 10. So a decade rounds out a 10-year period. So December or desa means 10. Decimal is 1 through 9 with a 0. That point starts things over. So December is not the 12th month of the year. It's the 10th month of the year. And, oct for October, oct means 8, like an octagon. But October in the current calendar is the 10th month of the year. But the word itself will tell you October is not the 10th month of the year, it's the 8th month of the year. So like I said, it's right in there. It's right in the words. So when you really look into etymology, you start to see it. Also, the esoteric structure of the alphabets itself, the symbols that make up the words, it gets even more complex and deeper and deeper. But as you can see, the Council of Nicaea changed things, and they've kept us in the dark ever since. And it was because they controlled all the writing. There were very few people that were literate, except the clergy. So they had a lot of power to rewrite history, to change the meanings of words, and also to change time cycles. The date that they made the sun enter Aries was March 21st. Why? March 21st should be the first day of Aries, the head. Aries means to arise. April 19th should be the first day of Taurus, the neck. And when they're talking about the head and the neck, they're talking about that man, Jacob, the heel catcher, the body in the sky. So each month correlates to a part of the human body. So Aries is the head, Taurus is the neck, and so on and so forth. It goes all the way down the body each month, on through the 12 signs. But these designing schemers knew that by thus suppressing the truth, people might come to realize what was meant by, and in quotes, the heavens declare the glory of God. Again, the moon in its monthly moon, mon, Monday, all come from the same word. So every moon is a month. The moon in its monthly round of 29 and a half days enters the outer stars of a constellation 2.5 days before it enters the central suns of the constellations that are known as the signs of the zodiac, or the circle of beasts. But even unto this day, the whole Antichrist world, so-called Christian, except the astrologers, go by almanacs that make the moon enter a sign of the zodiac 2.5 days before it does enter it, and thus perpetuate the lie of the pagan Constantine, the Antichrist. The ancients all knew this, and our rituals were in accordance with the sacredness of the human body, both male and female.
This means that this balancing force is engineerable. That means it's possible to do a type of vibrational engineering with these energies. This is the exact same vibratory energy as what you see around the heads or the bodies of the saints in every tradition. It's not a metaphor, it's an actual vibrational force. There are ways this can be engineered and activated, and they use this all the time in the ancient world. They could use it from anything from powerful spiritual activations to profound healing to projecting extremely toxic and deadly vibrations. That unless you're trained in an energetic science like Chinese medicine, and Western medical doctor will never even know what happened to the person because they won't see the blockages that it creates. They won't see the effects on the energy flows. So when I began to work with vibrational teachings and methods of different traditions all over the world, which I was able to focus on during the 12 years that I spent at the university getting my doctorate in international studies, there's always a challenge because different traditions will look at the vibrational realities around us, the vibrations that affect human consciousness, that affect our thoughts, our feelings, as well as our energy system every moment of every day. They'll analyze these through different methods. There's a concept that I refer to as the number prism, that to understand any phenomena, what we do in a modern scientific approach is we divide it into its component parts. And so what you'll find in India, for example, to understand healing vibrations, they tend to divide them into 3 different parts. And they'll talk about the 3 gunas. They'll talk about vata and pitta and kapha. These are 3-fold division. In the West, there'd often be a 4-fold division of the 4 elements. In China, a 5-fold division of the 5 elements. To fully understand any system in the world and to be able to differentiate out every one of its core aspects requires, at minimum, a 12-fold division. This is a classical teaching from great spiritual and healing traditions in the world. That's why there are 12 disciples around the Christ, why there are 12 imams in Shia Islam, while there are a division of the stars into 12 signs of the zodiac around the sun. It's 12 around the one. For those of you that know sacred geometry, and you look at how a cube is structured, a cube is the form that gives rise to matter. The cube has 12 lines that define the cube. If you look at a sphere, you can fit exactly 12 spheres around a central sphere. Again, 12 around the one. So, to lead to the discussion directly of this, I want to give a frame of reference of what we have done to create modern technology. Because sometimes we take for granted that we live in an age of technological miracles. We just are so exposed to it every day, we don't think about it anymore. But the world has been completely transformed in the last 100 years through discoveries that have taken place over the last 150 years. Now, what I'm referring to here is that to have a science, you need to be able to differentiate any aspect of things into its component parts. You need to have a spectrum, what we would call spectrum analysis. So one of the first breakthroughs that we had was the identification of every type of matter that exists in the physical world. In the ancient world, you never had that. So we live in a material world, but we didn't know what all the different pieces of matter were until the latter part of the 1800s with the identification of the periodic table of elements. What we call the periodic table of elements is really the identification of the complete spectrum of matter itself. That opened up everything in material science for all of our modern technology. But then there was another breakthrough that took place in the late 1800s and then was finalized in the year 1932. And that was identifying the complete spectrum of electromagnetic energy. Because until 1932, with the identification of microwaves, we didn't have an understanding of the complete spectrum of electromagnetic energies. So what you find in many classical traditions is that they will talk about different levels of creation. So there's the physical level, there's the etheric life energy level, that in China would be called chi, or in Japan would be called ki, or in India would be called prana. Greeks would call it the ether. So this etheric vital force energy is above that of the physical. Then there are consciousness levels, beginning with what we call in the West the astral level. Well, with all these different levels, we have to understand a progression that is taking place in modern science. People don't properly understand what electromagnetic energy is, because time and time again, in subtle energy research in modern times, things dealing with etheric life force, with chi, we try to get validity from modern science by saying the vital life force is electromagnetic. Electromagnetic energy is not the vital life force. If it was, you could plug the base of your spine into an electrical outlet and get charged up. But it doesn't work that way. In fact, as we'll describe later tonight, there's a vibrational component in electromagnetic energy that is extremely toxic. And that's why people get electrosensitivity and have detrimental effects from electrical fields. What the vital life force is that's above the level of the physical, in every classical tradition, they understood that this vital life force is what went into the physical and animated it. It's the animating power. So when we understand that, we'll understand that when that power has animated the physical body through what the Chinese call the universal chi field, or what the Greeks would call the ether, that animation process creates resistance passing through the conductor of the human body, passing through the conductor of physical materials, and that means that this faster than light energy slows way down. And this particular energy from the ether begins to decay. The decay of the etheric energy, of the vital force energy, is what we call electromagnetic energy. That's why Nikola Tesla in his work said, well, today in technology, we work with retarded Hertzian waves that are slower than light. But Tesla in the 1890s said there's another type of wave, scalar waves, that are faster than light. And that's the real thing behind the electromagnetic energy. So for what I'm about to describe to you, the concept is then that our electromagnetic energy is in fact decayed life force. It's the decayed vital energy that animates living beings. But it became a shadow substance, an electromagnetic energy. Now it becomes gross enough, it becomes dense enough that we can use it to do things like turn a physical motor and create our modern technology. Hard to do that with the ether. You can animate a living being. And it said that some traditions have been able to harness the ether to be able to turn motors. There's a lot of work going on in this field today in things like the Tesla Society. But that gross level of the energy and electromagnetic energy is what we use in modern technology. So the discovery of this vibrational spectrum of all the subtle energies that are too subtle to be picked up by electromagnetic equipment began to take place in the 1930s in France. One of the major researchers was a radio wave engineer named Louis Turin. And Louis Turin had studied French radiesthesia, the method of being able to pick up subtle vibrations through the use of particular types of pendulums or other tools. Now, the difficulty we have today is that their method has almost nothing to do with what you see today with the use of pendulums and mental dowsing. It's a completely different method. In this work, they don't ask any mental questions. They don't program the pendulum mentally ahead of time for movement. Rather, the pendulums have particular types of angles or shapes built into them that resonate with a particular vibrational force, or they can be tuned to a series of different vibrations. Then, through the movement of the pendulum or other type of measurement tool, you'll then be able to perceive simply the presence or the absence of an invisible vibration that most people cannot perceive. Some people who are very sensitive energy healers or psychics may be able to perceive some of these energies. But what the tool allows you to do is then to pick up that vibratory force coming from any person, place, or thing. So with the work of Louis Turin as a radio wave engineer, he understood that there are all types of waves that are passing through us all the time that you'll have no idea even exist unless you have a tool to be able to detect it. So he knew from radio wave technology, radio waves are passing through things all the time. You don't know they're there until you use a crystal and you tune the crystal to pick up the broadcast. So using the concepts of the French radiesthesia, which I won't go into too much of the background tonight, but let's just say it goes back to ancient times, goes back to the ancient Egyptian temple science, goes back to the work of the Jesuits in the Catholic tradition. And this is not some conspiracy theory. This is actually coming from writings of Jesuit-trained French priests who wrote in French in the early 1900s and who wrote books about this. Then came into France, was given out to the public as an actual method to detect subtle vibrations, and then was taken further by people like Louis Turin. This was a gigantic development in subtle energy work, to be able to differentiate the complete spectrum of all subtle energies into 12 parts. This then gave us a 12-fold spectrum with the color bands associated with it. Now here's the thing. These 12 vibrations that make up the complete spectrum of subtle energy, the exact same way that the electromagnetic spectrum shows the complete spectrum of electromagnetic energy, these energies were described for simplicity by the French in terms of colors. Because all of these subtle vibrations, they may be completely invisible, or that vibration can appear in